Alien dog girl attacked the human, but his bite awoke something ancient. The sky was dark red, full of smoke and fire. Commander Eli Draven woke up inside a smoking crater. His spaceship had crashed, and everything around him was silent. No birds, no wind, just smoke rising into the sky. Eli tried to sit up. His body hurt, and his suit was damaged. One of his arms was bleeding, and there was a sharp pain in his leg. He looked around. The trees were tall, with purple leaves and black, twisting trunks. The air smelled strange, like metal and wet stone. This was not Earth. Not any place on the star maps either. His ship was gone, broken into pieces, some parts still burned. Eli stood slowly. He limped forward, searching for supplies. Most of the equipment was destroyed, but he found a flare gun and one emergency pack. No radio signal, no help. He was truly alone. As he walked through the forest, he felt like something was watching him. The trees made soft sounds like whispers, but no wind touched his face. Then he heard a growl. It was low, deep, and close. Eli turned, knife in hand, eyes scanning the trees. A figure stepped out from the shadows. She looked almost human, but not quite. Her body was covered in soft fur, brown and gold. Her eyes glowed yellow. She had ears like a wolf and sharp claws on her hands. She stood on two legs and moved with grace. Like a hunter, Eli froze. He didn't want to fight, but he was ready. The alien girl walked around him in a slow circle, sniffing the air. Her nose twitched. She didn't speak. She just watched him, curious. Then, in a flash, she jumped. Her mouth opened wide, and she bit into his shoulder. Eli shouted in pain. His knife dropped to the ground. He struggled, pushed her back, and then on instinct he bit her arm. His teeth dug into her fur and skin, not hard enough to break it, but strong enough to leave a mark. The alien girl froze. She stared at him, shocked, her golden eyes wide. She stepped back. Her ears twitched, and she looked at her arm, then at him. Her face changed. She no longer looked like a wild hunter. She looked confused. Then she did something Eli did not expect. She knelt. She lowered her head and looked up at him, like she was waiting for something. Eli didn't move. His shoulder burned from the bite, but he couldn't stop staring at her. What just happened? Was this some kind of alien greeting? A test? A challenge? The girl stood again, slowly, carefully. She sniffed the air one more time. Then, with a quiet growl, she turned and ran into the trees. Fast and light, like the wind, Eli stood alone, his heart pounding. He looked down at the bite on his arm. Blood was dripping into the dirt. But something else was happening. His skin where she bit him felt warmer, not just pain, but something strange like a spark or a signal. He didn't know it yet. But that one bite had changed everything in her world. A bite was not just an attack, it was a ritual, a message. By biting her back, Eli had answered it in a way no other creature ever had. Now, he was part of something he didn't understand. And she wasn't going to forget him. Not now, not ever. High above the trees, hidden behind thick leaves, other eyes watched Eli. More creatures like her, silent and still, had seen it all. They did not blink. They did not speak. But soon they would come for him, not to kill, to test, to judge, because the human had done the impossible. He had bitten back. Eli didn't sleep that night. He built a small fire near the wreckage and sat with his back against a metal panel. From his broken ship, his shoulder still hurt from the bite, but the bleeding had stopped. He kept looking toward the forest, waiting, listening. The alien girl was gone, but her eyes were still in his mind. That look, just before she ran, it was not anger, not fear. It was something else, something deeper, something human. Eli didn't know what to do. He was trained for war, for science missions, for survival, but not for this. He checked the flare gun again. One shot left. No signal had come. Maybe no one was coming. Morning came with pale blue light. The trees glowed softly, like they had stored light overnight. Eli walked a little farther from the crash, trying to find clean water. That's when he saw her again. She was standing between two thick trees, watching him, not hiding. Eli froze. She didn't move either. He raised his hands slowly, showing he had no weapon. She stepped forward. One step, then another, her head tilted like a curious animal. He said nothing, just waited. She stopped a few feet away, then crouched. She placed something on the ground and pushed it toward him. It was fruit, round and red, dripping with juice. Eli looked at it, then at her, a gift, or a test. Again, he picked it up and took a bite. It was sweet and cold, like watermelon. The girl's ears twitched, and she made a soft sound, almost like a laugh. Eli smiled just a little. Then he took a step forward and did something strange. He picked up a broken solar cell from his belt and offered it to her. She looked at it, sniffed it, then took it in her hand. Her fingers felt the edges, her claws tapping the glass. She liked the way it caught the light. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his arm. Her hand was warm, rough but gentle. Her fingers brushed over the scar from her bite. He didn't pull away. She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, there was silence between them. Not fear, not anger, just understanding. Then she pointed to herself, thumped her chest lightly, and said a sound, Rue. Eli frowned. She said it again, slower, Rue, her name. He pointed to himself, Eli. She repeated it, not perfect, but close. Eli. He laughed once, quietly. She made the sound again, smiling with sharp teeth. Then something changed. From the forest behind her, a howl rose into the air, deep and long. Rue's ears twitched hard. Her body tensed. Her smile vanished. She looked back, then at him, then back again. She motioned with her hands, quick and sharp. Run, hide, danger. Then she grabbed his wrist and pulled hard. Eli followed, stumbling over roots and rocks. She moved fast, but she didn't let go. They ran through thick trees and across a stream. Then Rue stopped and pushed him into a hollow under an old tree. She crouched next to him, eyes locked on the forest. More sounds came, growls, fast footsteps, heavy breathing. Dark shapes moved between the trees, not like Rue. These were bigger, slower, louder, hunters. One passed close by. Its face was like Rue's, but older, rougher. Its mouth hung open, tongue black, claws sharp and stained. It sniffed the air, then moved on. Eli held his breath. Rue placed a hand on his chest to keep him still. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The forest grew quiet again. Rue looked at him, then at the fading light. Her face was serious now, not soft like before. She spoke a few words he didn't understand, but the meaning was clear. She had broken a rule by helping him, and now others were looking for him, for her, maybe for both. Eli didn't know it yet, but his bite had marked him as something rare, something dangerous, something the rest of her kind would not ignore. Rue stood and offered him her hand. He took it. She was no longer just curious now. She was protecting him. But why? And for how long? The ground was wet with morning mist, and the air smelled like iron and flowers. Eli followed Rue through the silent forest, stepping where she stepped, copying her movements. He didn't speak. She didn't either. Words were still too hard, but something between them didn't need words anymore. Rue moved fast, always listening, always checking behind them. She wasn't running now, but she wasn't calm either. Her ears stayed sharp, her claws never fully relaxed. Eli could feel the change in her. She was no longer just curious about the human. Now she was afraid for him, or maybe afraid of what might come because of him. They reached a place where tall stones rose from the ground like teeth. Each stone had deep marks carved into them, symbols, faces, animal shapes. Rue stopped. She placed a hand on one of the stones and lowered her head. Eli watched her closely. She whispered something, low and fast, then pointed to a crack between the rocks, a narrow tunnel, just big enough to crawl through. Without a word, she went in, and he followed. Inside, the air was cooler. Echoes bounced from the walls as they moved deeper. At the end of the tunnel, the path opened into a hidden cave, glowing. Moss lit the walls. Pools of water shimmered in the soft light. This was not just a cave. This was a shelter, a secret place. Eli sat down on a flat stone, breathing hard. His shoulder ached again, and his leg throbbed. Rue sat across from him and pulled something from her pouch, a small pouch made of leaf and string. She opened it and dipped her fingers into a thick yellow paste. Without asking, she moved close and touched the paste to his wound. It stung like fire. But Eli didn't pull away. She worked carefully, gently, her hands steady, her face close. When she finished, She leaned back and watched him with quiet eyes. Eli looked around the cave, noticing small things now. Paintings on the wall. Small bones tied with string. Marks scratched into the floor. This was her place, or had been, once. He pointed to the wall painting, one that showed figures around a fire. One figure was smaller and held something in its mouth. He tapped it lightly, and then pointed at Rue. She smiled faintly, then nodded. Just once, it was her. She had come here as a child. Maybe she had hidden here before. Maybe she had always been different from her kind. Eli didn't know her story, but he could feel it. This was her quiet world, kept away from others. Now she had brought him into it. He took a deep breath and looked at his hand, still stained from her touch, from her medicine, from her world. A sound echoed from the tunnel behind them. Rue was on her feet in 1 second, claws ready, body low. Eli grabbed a metal pipe from his pack, the closest thing he had to a weapon, from the dark. Something crawled into the cave. It wasn't big, but it wasn't alone. 3 small creatures entered, their skin gray and slimy, eyes black and wide. They hissed as they moved, sharp teeth snapping. Rue growled low in her throat. Her voice shook the cave walls. The first creature jumped, but she caught it midair and slammed it to the stone floor. Eli swung his pipe at the second, hitting it hard. It screamed, then ran. The third stopped, looked at them both and fled. In seconds, it was over. Rue stood over the first creature, breathing fast, blood on her claws. Eli stepped beside her and looked down. He had seen many aliens before, but never like this. It wasn't one of her kind. It was something else, a scavenger, a spy, or maybe something worse. Rue touched her shoulder and made a short clicking sound. She was warning him. The cave was no longer safe. They were being watched. Eli nodded. His hand brushed against hers for a moment, just enough to feel the strength inside her. She didn't pull away this time, not now. Together, they left the cave, back into the trees, into the world that was hunting them both. Eli didn't know where they were going, but for the first time, he didn't care. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was part of something ancient, and whatever it was, it had only just begun. The forest had changed. It was darker now, even in daylight. The trees grew closer together, and their twisted branches blocked the sky. Eli moved behind Rue, careful not to step too loudly. They had been walking for hours, deeper into the unknown. He could feel it in his bones. This place was old, ancient, like it remembered everything that had ever happened here. Rue stopped at the edge of a wide stone circle, cracked and overgrown with moss. She didn't move forward. Her ears were alert, her tail low, and her hands clenched at her sides. Eli stepped beside her, looking around. Strange markings were carved into the ground, large symbols, circles inside circles, some still glowing faintly with red light. He looked at Rue and raised an eyebrow. "What is this place?" She didn't answer with words. Instead, she walked slowly to the center of the circle and sat cross-legged. She closed her eyes and began to hum a deep, low sound that echoed through the trees. Eli stayed outside the circle, not sure if he should step in. Something told him this was not meant for him. Not yet. The air grew heavy. The leaves above stopped moving, even though there was no wind. And then they came. 6 shadows appeared from the forest edge, moving silently like ghosts. Each one looked like Rue, but older, stronger, and dressed in darker colors. Their eyes locked on Eli, not with curiosity, but with judgment. They entered the circle, surrounding Rue, and began to hum with her. The sound shook the ground slightly. Eli felt it in his chest, like a second heartbeat. Then, one of them turned and spoke to him, not in English, but with deep, rumbling words that carried power. Eli didn't understand the language, but he understood the meaning. "Step in. Prove yourself." He looked at Rue. Her eyes opened slowly, and she gave a small nod. So he stepped forward, across the ancient markings, into the circle. As soon as he crossed the line, a wave of heat ran through his body. He stumbled but kept going. The others backed away, leaving space in the center. From the edge, one of the elders tossed something to the ground, a long bone staff with carvings from end to end. Another dropped something at Ellie's feet, his own broken metal pipe from the cave. This was no welcome. This was a test. Eli picked up the pipe, bent slightly now but still strong in his grip. from across the circle. A challenger stepped forward. It was not Rue, but another like her, larger, eyes full of fire. He twirled his staff with practiced hands and growled. Eli had no choice. He raised his pipe and braced himself. The first blow came fast. The staff cracked against Ellie's shoulder, knocking him back. Pain shot through him, but he didn't fall. He charged forward, swinging wide. The pipe slammed into the other's side. The circle shouted loud calls, not angry, not pleased, just watching. Blow after blow, they fought. Eli moved like a soldier, rough but smart. His opponent moved like a beast trained from birth, but Eli didn't back down, not once. His legs shook, his arms bled, but his grip stayed firm. Then, when the challenger raised the staff high for a final strike, Eli lunged forward. He grabbed the staff with both hands, twisted it, and slammed the pipe against the challenger's side. The alien dropped the weapon and fell to one knee. Breathing hard, Eli stepped back, ready for another attack, but it didn't come. Instead, the challenger looked up at him and smiled, a sharp-toothed, blood-smeared smile of respect. Then the others began to hum again. Slower this time, softer. Rue stepped forward, her eyes bright with something new pride. She touched Ellie's arm gently, her claws retracted. Then she turned to the others and spoke, not just with words, but with body and voice. She was claiming something. Not just that Eli passed the test, but that he belonged. The elder who had first spoken came forward, placing a hand on Ellie's head. Then Rue's. The circle was complete. Eli was now part of something older than he could understand, but something deep inside him accepted it, and just beyond the trees, far away but growing closer, something else watched, something that did not want a human inside this world, something coming soon. Eli didn't know it yet, but the bite he gave and the fight he won had started a war he hadn't chosen, not with weapons, but with blood. The forest was still, too still. Even the wind had gone quiet, as if the world itself was waiting. Eli stood at the edge of a canyon, its walls jagged and black like old scars across the land below. Steam rose from glowing cracks in the earth, and strange lights flickered between shadows. Rue stood beside him, silent, focused. Her body was tense, her fur standing slightly on edge behind them. The elders of her kind waited, unmoving. One of them stepped forward, a tall figure with a torn ear and a spear carved from bone. He pointed down toward the canyon, then pointed at Eli. The message was clear. Go in, prove yourself again, this time. Number circle, no ceremony, just one human, one path, and whatever waited in the dark. Eli looked at Rue. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. She didn't want him to go, but he had to, not just for survival, not just to earn a place among them, but because the bite he gave her had started something no one could stop. Now, he climbed down slowly, hands scraping on hot stone. The air grew thicker, every breath heavier. Deep below, the ground shook softly like something was breathing beneath it. He reached the bottom and looked around. Bones, old, cracked bones scattered everywhere, big ones, too big for any creature he had seen. In the center of the canyon was a single stone, black and smooth, with ancient symbols burned into its surface. As Eli stepped closer, the ground beneath him lit up in red. A ring of glowing lines pulsed from the stone. Then something moved in the shadows. Not one shape, but many, creatures with hard skin like armor, eyes like cold glass, mouths too wide and filled with teeth. They crawled from the dark, slow and quiet, surrounding him. Eli raised his pipe, the same one he used in the last fight. Bent but solid. He wasn't going to run. The first creature lunged. Eli sidestepped and hit it across the neck. It fell back, screeching. Another came, claws swinging. Eli ducked and slammed the pipe into its side, but there were too many. One grabbed his arm. Another bit his leg. He fought hard, swinging, kicking, shouting, his vision blurred, pain burning through his limbs. Then a roar echoed from above. Rue. She dropped from the canyon wall like a flash of gold and fury. Her claws ripped through the first creature. Her teeth tore into another. She moved like lightning, every motion sharp and perfect. But even with her help, there were too many. They were being pushed back, inch by inch. Then Eli saw it. The black stone was changing, glowing brighter, pulsing faster. It wasn't just a test, it was a key. Eli dropped his weapon and ran toward it, dodging claws and teeth. He placed both hands on the stone and felt it burn under his skin. A voice entered his mind, not in words, but in raw feeling, anger, pain, memory. This place had seen war before, long ago, and it had never healed. Eli gritted his teeth and shouted, not in fear, but in defiance. He screamed into the stone, into the power buried deep below, and something answered. A wave of force exploded from the stone, knocking every creature off its feet. Even Rue staggered back, eyes wide. The ground split open, and fire shot into the sky. The creatures fled, crawling back into the cracks, screeching in fear. The light faded slowly, and silence returned. Eli collapsed beside the stone, smoke rising. From his hands, Rue ran to him, grabbing his arm, checking his eyes, his breath. He was alive, barely. But something in him had changed. She could feel it. The others above the canyon watched from the shadows. Silent, the test had ended, and Eli had not just passed it. He had awakened something older than their laws, older than their tribe. When he finally opened his eyes, he looked at Rue, his voice dry. I saw something, he whispered, something broken. She nodded. She knew, and now they would have to face it, together. Because the power he touched was not meant for humans, but it had chosen one and others. Far beyond this world, had felt it rise. They were coming. The stars above were no longer quiet. High in the sky, a new light had appeared, small, fast, and not part of the night. It moved like a hunter, not a star, not a comet. Eli saw it first while standing on a cliff. The sky looked calm, but that light was wrong. It was blinking, and it was getting closer. He turned to Rue, who stared at the light without blinking. Her ears pressed flat, her tail stiff. She knew it too. Whatever that was, it was not from her world. It was not part of the old trials or her people's laws. This was something new, something from far beyond the forest, something like him, but not like him. They moved quickly after that, back through the trees and hills. Rue led him to an ancient tower made of stone and metal, buried halfway into the ground, half ruins, half machine. The air around it buzzed with quiet power. She placed her hand on a round panel near the entrance. The stone clicked and slid open, revealing a dark tunnel below. Eli followed her into the cold chamber, the walls filled with carvings and glowing threads. This place was old, older than her tribe, older than even the test he passed, a memory from another time. At the center of the chamber, a smooth black table showed moving lights and shapes. He saw a map, maybe planets, stars, paths across space. And there one glowing dot was moving toward the planet fast. Rue pointed at it, then at him. Her face was serious, her voice low. He couldn't understand the words, but the meaning hit him like thunder. They are looking for you. He stepped back, breathing hard. The creatures he fought in the canyon weren't the real enemy. They were protectors of a gate, keepers of a warning. The real danger was coming now from the sky, a ship. Not from Earth, not from her people, but from something in between. He looked closer at the map and saw symbols that matched nothing he had ever seen. Not human, not alien, just wrong. He felt a hand on his shoulder. Rue stood beside him, calm and steady. She was not afraid, but she was ready. The next day, the sky cracked. The blinking light became a shape, a sharp, black craft that hovered above the trees without a sound. Then it opened. Figures dropped to the ground, tall, thin, wrapped in silver armor that shimmered like oil. Their faces were hidden, their movements smooth. They didn't speak. They scanned, searching. And when they found the first trail ashes from Ellie's canyon test, they began to move, fast and quiet. Eli and Rue watched from a high ridge, hidden by branches. He gripped his weapon, but deep down he knew it wouldn't be enough, not against them. Not this time. Rue looked at him and tapped her chest, then tapped his heart. Then she whispered a word he had only heard once before, Bond. He didn't answer, just nodded. She stepped forward and let out a howl, sharp, powerful, and full of meaning, a call to her tribe, to those still watching, still hiding. It was time to choose, either stand with the old ways or fight for something new, for something that had a human name. The enemy heard the howl. The silver-armored soldiers turned toward the sound and began to run, but they didn't. See what waited in the trees. Dozens of eyes, glowing gold, claws on stone, growls in the wind. The forest was no longer silent. Rue's people stepped from the shadows, not as hunters, but as warriors. Beside them stood Eli, no longer just a visitor, no longer just a survivor. He was one of them now. The fight that followed was not clean, not perfect. The silver soldiers had weapons that burned the trees and melted stone, but the forest fought back. Claws tore through armor, teeth found weakness in machines, and Eli he moved through the chaos with fire in his blood. He didn't need a perfect weapon. He was the weapon, and as he fought, something inside him unlocked. Something ancient, connected to the black stone, to the symbols in the chamber. He could feel their movements, their plans. He shouted a warning. Just before one of them triggered a hidden blast, Rue heard him and leapt forward, tackling the soldier before the device could activate. Together, they brought it down. The rest fled, their signal lost, their numbers broken. When it was over, the forest was scarred, but standing, the people gathered around Eli. Not as strangers, but as kin. He had bled for them, fought beside them, called out to the old power, and survived. But he also knew this was not the end. That ship in the sky was only the first, and whatever had awakened in him was still growing. Rue placed a hand on his chest, her eyes soft again. She smiled, just slightly, and said one word, home. Smoke curled from the broken trees, rising into the sky like old ghosts. The battle was over, but the world had changed. Eli stood at the edge of the clearing, blood dried on his arms, dust clinging to his face. Behind him, the tribe worked silently, clearing the bodies, burying the fallen. The enemy ship was gone, cracked open and burning. But its message remained. They would come again. Rue walked beside him, her steps slow, careful. Her arm was wrapped in a cloth, clawed but healing. They had survived, but they had also been marked, not just by wounds, but by something deeper. Eli turned his eyes to the stars above, searching for any sign of more ships, more lights. All was still, but he didn't trust the silence anymore. The elders gathered around a large fire in the center of the camp. Their eyes watched Eli with new meaning, not doubt, not fear, respect. One of them stepped forward and placed something in Ellie's hands, a fang, carved from stone, wrapped in strands of Rue's fur. It was a gift, but also a message. He was no longer an outsider. He had earned his place. Eli closed his fingers around the fang and nodded. He had fought for them, bled beside them, and become part of their story. But the story wasn't done yet. That night, as the fire died and the stars rose higher, Rue sat beside Eli on the cliff above the forest. She pointed to the sky and drew symbols in the dirt, circles, lines, dots. She spoke softly, slowly, and Eli listened. She was telling him about her ancestors, how they once walked among stars, not trees, how they fell to this planet long ago after a great war, and chose to forget who they were to survive. But now, something had changed. The old power was waking. Eli had touched it, awakened it, become part of it. He didn't know how or why, only that it had happened, and now others would come looking for it, looking for him. He looked at her, her fur glowing softly in the starlight, her gold eyes bright and calm. He reached out and placed the stone fang around her neck, tying the strand himself. She smiled, the kind of smile only she could give, sharp, proud, and warm all at once. Then she leaned closer and touched her forehead to his, a quiet gesture of peace and strength, a bond sealed not with words, but with pain and trust. He remembered the first time they met, the bite, the shock, the silence that followed. She had tested him. He had answered. And now he was hers, not as a pet, not as prey, but as something far more dangerous and equal. At dawn, a signal came from the wreck of his ship, a faint blinking light. The emergency beacon had somehow survived. Earth had heard him. Rescue was coming. He stared at the blinking light for a long time, not sure what to feel. He could go back, return to a world where he had rank, control, familiar food and air. But when he looked at Rue, standing at his side, he knew that world was no longer his, not fully. He had changed, and maybe Earth wasn't ready for what he had become. He walked to the beacon, reached down and switched it off. No message sent, no trail left. The forest would remain untouched. For now, he turned to Rue. She nodded. She had known what he would choose before he did. They walked back together, past the graves, past the cracked stones, into the deep green shadows of her world. His world now, too. The final bite had not been one of pain, but of meaning. She had marked him, and he had marked her, to creatures from different stars, bound by one moment of instinct, and far above, in the cold silence of space, new lights moved, watching, waiting, because the war was not over. It had only just begun. And now, somewhere in the trees of a forgotten planet, a human and a wild girl stood together, ready for whatever came next.